The moment Marcus Winters peeled back the worn blue tarp covering his backyard pool, he knew he'd made a terrible mistake. Not in purchasing the house with its neglected in-ground pool 3 months ago, but in waiting until mid-July to finally address the swampy disaster that had greeted him upon moving in. What had once been a suburban oasis now resembled a primordial soup, murky green water thick with algae hosting what Marcus was certain must be an entire ecosystem of mosquito larvae and God knows what else. "Holy hell," Marcus muttered, swatting away the clouded insects that rose from the disturbed water. The stench hit him seconds later, a putrid cocktail of stagnant water, rotting leaves, and what might have been a decomposing squirrel or two. At 35, Marcus had finally achieved the suburban dream. A modest 3-bedroom ranch on Willow Lane with good schools and quiet neighbors. Or so he thought. The previous owners had mentioned minor pool maintenance needed, which ranked among the most spectacular understatements Marcus had ever encountered. What they'd failed to disclose was that the pool hadn't been properly cleaned or maintained in at least 2 years. His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Damon, his contractor buddy, returning his desperate plea for help. "Tell me again why you bought a house for the pool when you know nothing about pools," Damon laughed through the speaker. "Because I'm an idiot who believed the home inspector when he said it just needed a good cleaning," Marcus replied, kicking a fallen branch from the concrete pool deck. "So what's the verdict? Can we salvage this?" The silence on the other end spoke volumes before Damon finally answered, "Look, I've seen the photos you sent. That liner is shot, cracked in multiple places. The filtration system is probably corroded beyond repair. The concrete around the edges is crumbling. Honestly, you're looking at a complete tear-out and rebuild." Marcus's stomach dropped. "And the damage to my bank account would be 30 grand minimum, probably closer to 40 with the current prices." The world seemed to tilt slightly as Marcus processed this information. He'd stretched his budget to buy a house in the first place. There was no way he could afford to rebuild the pool. "What are my other options?" he asked, already dreading the answer. "Fill it in. Convert it to a patio or garden space. Probably set you back 5 to 7 grand, which still sucks, but it's better than having this liability pit in your backyard." Marcus stared at the festering swamp before him. He'd never been much of a swimmer anyway. "All right," he said with a sigh of resignation. "Let's fill this monster in. How soon can you start?" "I can get a crew there next Tuesday. We'll need permits, though. Check with the city before we begin demolition." Marcus thanked his friend and hummed up, already mentally preparing himself for the bureaucratic hurdles ahead. What he couldn't possibly prepare for was Diane Kensington, the neighborhood watch captain from across the street, who had already reported 3 other neighbors for various code violations in the 2 months since Marcus had moved in. As he turned to head back inside, he caught sight of her, standing at the edge of her immaculately landscaped yard, arms crossed over her chest, watching him with narrowed eyes. Marcus offered a friendly wave, but Diane merely pursed her lips and disappeared inside her colonial 2-story. Little did Marcus know that his decision to remove his derelict pool was about to trigger a suburban saga that would draw in local law enforcement, the entire neighborhood association, and turn him into an unwitting local legend. The permits had been a nightmare. 3 separate forms, an environmental impact statement, and a $425 filing fee that Marcus reluctantly put on his already strained credit card. But finally, Tuesday morning arrived, and with it came Damon's crew, 4 burly men in work boots and sun-faded t-shirts, armed with sledgehammers, jackhammers, and a small excavator that barely fit through the gate of Marcus's wooden fence. "We'll drain it first," Damon explained as the men connected industrial pumps to hoses that snaked around the side of the house. "The water's got too much algae and chemicals to just dump into the storm drain, so we've got this filtration system to clean it before it goes out. City requirement." Marcus nodded, pretending he understood the complexities of pool demolition as he watched the crew work. The noise was tremendous. The pumps gurgled and wheezed as they sucked up the putrid water, and the men shouted instructions to each other over the din. It was barely 8:30 a.m. when the first knock came at his front door. He opened it to find Diane Kensington standing on his porch, her salt and pepper bob immaculately styled despite the summer humidity, wearing pressed khaki shorts and a polo shirt with a neighborhood association logo embroidered on the breast pocket. "Good morning," Marcus offered, trying to sound friendly despite his immediate sense of dread. "Is it?" Diane replied, her thin lips pursed. "Some of us were trying to enjoy our morning coffee in peace. The noise coming from your property is excessive and began before the acceptable hours outlined in the neighborhood covenant." Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry about the noise. We're removing the old pool." "Removing?" Diane's perfectly shaped eyebrows shot up. "The Architectural Review Committee has to approve any exterior modifications. Did you submit Form 27B for landscape alterations? It requires 3 copies and neighborhood board approval." "I have city permits," Marcus replied, feeling increasingly cornered on his own front porch. The pool was a safety hazard. Safety concerns still require proper channels, she said, her voice taking on a lecturing tone. And speaking of safety, that equipment blocking the sidewalk is a violation of Municipal Code 8.153. Behind Diane, Marcus could see two other niggers gathering on the sidewalk, shooting curious glances toward his house while pretending to check their mail or walk their dogs. Look, I'll ask the guys to move the truck, but this work is necessary and fully permitted by the city, Marcus said firmly, his patience wearing thin. Diane's eyes narrowed. I'll need to see those permits. As neighborhood watch captain, I'm responsible for ensuring compliance with— No. Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with his boldness. You're not entitled to see my permits. They've been approved by the city, and that's what matters. A flush crept up Diane's neck. Well, I see. Don't be surprised if you receive a notice from the association. She turned on her heel and marched down the walkway, phone already in hand, furiously tapping at the screen. By mid-afternoon, the pool had been drained, revealing cracked concrete and the shredded remnants of the liner. The crew had begun breaking up the pool deck with jackhammers when a white SUV with Pine Ridge Neighborhood Association emblazoned on the door pulled up across the street. A balding man in his short-sleeved dress shirt emerged, clipboard in hand, and made a beeline for Marcus's house. Mr. Winters, I'm Howard Peterson, Neighborhood Association Manager. We've received complaints about unauthorized property modifications. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. Howard, I've got city permits. The pool was a hazard. It could have literally killed someone. Howard glanced nervously toward Diane's house, where she stood watching from her bay window. Nevertheless, there are procedures. The association has guidelines about. The house came with a pool. I'm removing it because it's dangerous and beyond repair. How is that against the rules? Marcus demanded. Howard cleared his throat. Well, there's the matter of property values. Pools are considered desirable features that enhance. Not when they're giant pits of disease that could kill a child, Marcus cut in. From the backyard, they heard a sudden commotion. Boss, you might want to see this. One of the workers called. Marcus excused himself and walked around back to find the crew gathered around the deep end of the pool staring at something. What is it? Marcus asked, approaching cautiously. Damon pointed to a rusted metal object partially embedded in the concrete. That's a safe. Someone embedded a safe in the concrete at the bottom of this pool. Marcus stared in disbelief. A safe? Like a safe for valuables? Yep. And based on how it's installed, it was put there when the pool was built. It's not an accident. From the corner of his eye, Marcus saw Diane peering over the fence, phone held high, clearly taking photos or possibly recording video. This bizarre discovery was only the beginning of what would become the most chaotic week of Marcus's life, and Diane Kensington was clearly taking detailed notes on every moment of it. The safe changed everything. What had begun as a straightforward pool demolition had suddenly morphed into something far more intriguing. Marcus, Damon, and the crew stood in a semicircle around the mysterious metal box, speculation running wild. Maybe it's full of cash, suggested one of the workers, leaning on his sledgehammer. People used to do that, hide their money from the government. Or drugs, offered another. This house is from the 70s, right? Could be some dealer's old stash. Damon crouched down, examining the rusty metal more closely. Could be empty. Could be full of water. No way to know without getting it out. So how do we do that? Marcus asked, aware that Diane was still watching intently from her vantage point, her phone recording every moment. We'll need a jackhammer carefully around it, then use the mini excavator to lift it out. It's going to add a few hours to the job, maybe more. As the crew reorganized to work around the safe, Marcus noticed Howard Peterson, the neighborhood association manager, talking anxiously on his phone at the edge of the yard. A moment later, Howard hurried over, looking even more flustered than before. Mr. Winters, this discovery raises additional concerns, he said, glancing nervously at the safe. The association board has convened an emergency meeting via conference call. They're concerned about potential historical artifacts. Marcus stared at him. Historical artifacts. It's a safe in a pool. Diane, Mrs. Kensington has pointed out that our neighborhood is in a historically significant area. Any artifacts found might need to be properly cataloged and preserved according to Section 14.2 of the— It's not an artifact, Marcus interrupted, feeling a headache forming behind his eyes. It's just a safe someone hid in their pool, probably the previous owners. Howard adjusted his glasses. Nevertheless, the board is requesting a temporary halt to the demolition until this can be sorted out. Before Marcus could respond, the sound of sirens cut through the humid afternoon air. 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of his house, lights flashing. You called the police? Marcus asked Howard incredulously. The manager raised his hands defensively. Not me. I merely notified the board. Marcus stormed toward the front yard. where two officers were already getting out of their vehicles. In his peripheral vision, he saw Diane Kensington hurrying across the street, waving frantically to get the officers' attention. "Officers, I'm the one who called," she announced, brandishing her neighborhood watch badge as if it granted her some official authority. "This man is conducting unauthorized excavation and has discovered what appears to be evidence of potential criminal activity." The older of the two officers, a weathered man with salt and pepper hair and a nameplate reading Sergeant Reynolds, glanced between Diane and Marcus with tired eyes. "Ma'am, what exactly is the issue here? He's illegally removing a swimming pool without proper authorization, and they've just uncovered his safe that could contain evidence of criminal activity from previous owners. As neighborhood watch captain, I thought it prudent to notify the authorities." Sergeant Reynolds turned to Marcus. "Sir, is there something you'd like to explain?" With as much patience as he could muster, Marcus led the officers to the backyard and showed them the city permits and the safe embedded in the concrete. "I bought this house 3 months ago. The pool was a disaster and a safety hazard, so I got permits to remove it. We just found this safe and I have no idea who put it there or what's in it." Reynolds nodded, examining the scene. "And these are all your permits in order?" "Yes, all approved and paid for." The younger officer, whose nameplate read Officer Chen, looked at the safe with interest. "You have no idea what's in there?" "None whatsoever," Marcus replied. "But I own the property, so whatever it is belongs to me now, right?" Reynolds scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Generally speaking, yes, unless it contains something illegal." "Mind if we stick around while you open it, just to be safe?" "Not at all," Marcus replied, relieved that the police seemed reasonable. "This is outrageous," Diane protested, having followed them into the backyard uninvited. "There are protocols for these situations. The neighborhood covenant clearly states—" "Ma'am," Sergeant Reynolds interrupted firmly, "neighborhood covenants don't supersede city permits or property rights. Mr. Winters has permission from the city to remove his pool. Whatever's in that safe isn't a police matter unless it contains something illegal." "But—" "Furthermore," Reynolds continued, his voice taking on an edge of annoyance, "this is the third call you've made this week about your neighbors, and we found no violations in any instance. I would suggest focusing on actual neighborhood safety concerns." Diane's face flushed crimson. "I am protecting property values and neighborhood standards. That's what the watch program is for." "Actually," Officer Chen interjected politely, "the neighborhood watch program is designed to report suspicious activity and prevent crime, not enforce HOA regulations." While this exchange unfolded, Damon and his crew had carefully freed the safe from its concrete prison. It was smaller than it had initially appeared, about the size of a microwave oven, but surprisingly heavy. The exterior was rusted but intact, with a combination dial on the front. "Moment of truth," Damon said as they set it on the pool deck. By now, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered at the edge of Marcus' property, whispering among themselves. Marcus recognized some of them as the same people who had barely acknowledged his existence when he moved in, but who now watched with undisguised curiosity. "Anyone know a good safecracker?" Marcus joked nervously. "We could try to cut it open," Damon suggested, "but I don't have the right equipment with me." Sergeant Reynolds stepped forward. "Before you go drilling or cutting, why not try the obvious? Check the bottom or back for a serial number. If it's a commercial safe, the manufacturer might have records." Marcus knelt down and examined the safe's underside, brushing away decades of rust and grime with his fingers. Sure enough, a faded but legible serial number was stamped into the metal. "Good call," he said, snapping a photo of the number with his phone. "Let me see if I can find anything online." As Marcus searched for information on the safe manufacturer, Diane paced anxiously at the edge of the group, her plans for stopping the pool demolition rapidly falling apart. The tension in the air was palpable as everyone waited to see what secrets the mysterious pool safe might hold, secrets that could either vindicate Diane's suspicious nature or turn Marcus into the neighborhood's most interesting resident overnight. After 30 minutes of internet research and several phone calls to the safe manufacturer, Marcus had the combination. A hush fell over the gathered crowd as he knelt before the rusty box, Sergeant Reynolds and Officer Chen standing on either side. "Ready?" Marcus asked, looking up at the officers. Reynolds nodded. "Go ahead." With fingers that trembled slightly, Marcus turned the dial right, then left, then right again, following the sequence provided by the manufacturer. The mechanism was stiff with age and disuse, but on his third attempt, something clicked. Marcus grasped the handle and pulled. The door creaked open with a sound like a horror movie coffin. Everyone leaned forward, breath held collectively as Marcus peered inside. Even Diane had temporarily ceased her protestations, her curiosity momentarily overriding her indignation. "Huh," Marcus said, reaching in and pulling out a sealed plastic bag. Inside was a stack of papers and what appeared to be a small book. "That's it. Someone from the crowd called out, "No treasure? No drugs?" added another, sounding equally disappointed. Sergeant Reynolds took the bag from Marcus and carefully opened it, examining the contents. "Looks like property deeds and a journal of some kind." Marcus accepted the items back and flipped through them. These are the original property deeds for this house from 1974, and several surrounding properties too. He had opened the journal and scanned the first few pages. It's a diary. Looks like it belonged to someone named Gerald Hoffman. From the edge of the crowd came a gasp. An elderly man stepped forward, leaning on a cane. "Gerald Hoffman was my uncle. He built most of the houses on this street back in the 70s, including yours and Diane's." Marcus looked up in surprise. "You're related to the builder?" The old man nodded. "Name's Walter Hoffman. Lived 4 houses down. Uncle Gerald was a bit eccentric. Always worried about government conspiracies and such. Kept detailed records of everything." Officer Chen smiled. "Well, that explains the underwater safe. But why these particular documents?" Walter shrugged. "Uncle Gerald believed property records might be tampered with someday. He probably kept copies of everything important to him. Man didn't trust banks either, had safes built into all sorts of places." "Wait," Marcus said, continuing to leaf through the journal. "There's something else here." He pulled out a faded blueprint that had been folded between the pages. "It looks like original plans for the neighborhood." Walter hobbled closer to examine the document. "Well, I'll be damned. That's the original master plan for Pine Ridge Estates. Uncle Gerald had a vision for this place: community gardens, shared recreation areas, walking paths connecting all the properties." "That's nothing like what we have now," remarked a neighbor. "No," Walter agreed. "The investors wanted a more traditional subdivision. More houses, less communal space, more profit. This was his original dream, though." As the neighbors crowded around to view this piece of their community's history, Diane pushed forward, her momentary silence broken. "This changes nothing," she insisted, voice brittle with frustration. "The pool removal still violates neighborhood guidelines." Walter Hoffman turned to her, eyebrows raised. "Actually, Miss Kensington, if those are the original deeds, they might include the original covenants before all the amendments your board has added over the years." A speculative murmur ran through the crowd. Diane's face paled slightly. Marcus quickly rifled through the deeds until he found the one for his property. Attached was indeed a copy of the original neighborhood covenants, just 2 pages long compared to the 30-page tom that had been included in his closing documents. "Well, would you look at that?" Marcus said, a slow smile spreading across his face as he scanned the document. According to the original covenants, homeowners may modify, remove, or add swimming pools and water features with proper city permits and without additional neighborhood approval. Isn't that interesting? Diane snatched the paper from his hands, reading frantically. "This is an outdated document. The association has amended these rules numerous times." Sergeant Reynolds cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I'm not a lawyer, but I believe original deed restrictions typically supersede hit-away amendments unless every homeowner has explicitly agreed to the changes." "That's correct," came a new voice. A woman in business attire approached from the street. "Samantha Reeves, I'm an attorney. I live on Maple Court and saw the commotion." The sergeant is right. Original deed restrictions generally prevail unless every owner has signed off on changes. Diane looked like she might spontaneously combust. "This is preposterous. The board has spent years perfecting our guidelines." "Perhaps," Samantha replied calmly, "but without unanimous consent for changes that restrict original property rights, they're largely unenforceable." Basic property law. Walter chuckled. Uncle Gerald was paranoid, but he was also clever. He believed neighborhoods should be communities, not little dictatorships. Sounds like he built in some protection against exactly the kind of overreach we've been seeing lately. All eyes turned to Diane, whose face cycled through various shades of red. For once, she seemed genuinely speechless. Taking advantage of her silence, Marcus addressed the assembled neighbors. "Look, I'm just trying to remove a dangerous, defunct pool and improve my property. I think we've established I have every right to do so. But more importantly, shouldn't we all be able to make reasonable improvements to our own homes without jumping through endless hoops?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Marcus could see several homeowners nodding, perhaps thinking of their own projects that had been delayed or denied by the association's Byzantine processes. "I propose," Marcus continued, warming to his subject, "that we revisit these original covenants at the next association meeting. Simplify things. Focus on what matters: safety, community, basic standards, and cut out the micromanagement." More nods, more supportive murmurs. Even Howard Peterson, the association manager, looked thoughtful rather than opposed. In that moment, Marcus realized he'd moved beyond merely defending his right to remove a pool. He'd inadvertently launched a neighborhood revolution. And judging by the apoplectic expression on Diane Kensington's face, she knew it too. This isn't over, she hissed, clutching the original covenant documents so tightly her knuckles whitened. The board will need to review all of this evidence. There will be meetings, legal consultations. Actually, Sergeant Reynolds interjected, those documents are Mr. Winter's property, found on his land. You might want to return them. With visible reluctance, Diane thrust the papers back at Marcus before turning on her heel. As she marched toward her house, Marcus could hear her already dialing her phone, no doubt summoning reinforcements for the battle ahead. But looking around at his neighbors, many of whom were introducing themselves to him for the first time, Marcus felt surprisingly optimistic. The mysterious pool safe hadn't contained gold or jewels, but something potentially more valuable, the keys to neighborhood harmony and the blueprint for a community as it was originally intended to be.